Hey everyone, Adam here, and today I want to talk with you about being consistent and supportive with your clients, right? This is something that is mostly account managers, client success, maybe even on a sales side, but this is more about internally of what you want to do and train about so that you're able to bring those results back to the organization with each client you're working with. Now, you want to be consistent across the board so that you do not have any gaps in information or any confusion on your side. Every single client, you have the same approach, you work with the same thing. If you don't have that, you should work towards standardizing right now. That's going to take time, but it will honestly make things easier, make things clear, and it won't be this whole like, wait, does this client have this level or this level? It will make things clear across the board. Now, if you're just doing this yourself and right now you're just starting out, it's not as big of a deal, but you need to think about these things for the future if you want to scale, you want to grow, right? So, one of the biggest things that you have to train is don't compromise, right? You want to be able to build your business based on value. You don't compromise value, you don't compromise what you do. All you do is you have a give and take on what you can provide. That's the biggest thing you need to train on is when you're talking to a client and they're like, nope, I can't do this price, you keep the price the same and you take out, or you're able to reduce the price only if you take out items that you're providing value on. If they want you to do the same amount of work for less money, you can't do that because that's compromising. That's also not being consistent in your pricing for other people. So it builds on itself. As an organization, you can't do that and you can say no. If you have a salesperson, you empower them to say no. That's not something we can do. If the client doesn't want that, the potential client doesn't want to do that, they'll move on to someone else. But those are not clients you're going to want to work with anyway. And it'll allow you to build clients that are in that same line of thinking and really want that value add for their business. So be consistent, don't compromise, have clear guidelines and boundaries, right? Make sure that every contract is created, that documented, everything that the client is saying from the sales, from the discovery process. All of those are notes that are taken and compiled and distilled into action items. Whether you never know what you're going to hear from a client. That's going to be incredibly important down the road, or incredibly important to winning them over, or making sure you get that project closed on time. You need to make sure that you're documenting and you have those clear, consistent pieces every step of the way. And that's where, if you're going to be able to do the contract and you have those guidelines internally, right? You have to do the contract done. That also goes with, in a contract, you have a timeline. You need to agree upon a timeline with your clients. You need to make sure that internally you can meet that timeline. You have the capacity to do it. You need to have all these pieces ready to go. Your team should be able to check in with your other, development or design team or project managers to make sure you can fit this project in the right timing. It also needs to fit in with the business goals. What are cash flow needs? What are the prioritizations that you need to have happen? Is this an expedited client, right? You need to have this done sooner. Are you going to charge more for that, right? Or is the client like, no, I can wait a month and start my project in a month? Those are the questions you need to vet out in the front so you have the right expectations and the right guidelines set up from the beginning. One of the biggest things when we're talking about the contract is you have to set that budget. Now, when you're negotiating on that, in the contract, you need to have the budget clearly stated, when they're going to pay, what their deliverables are going to be for that. You need to know when, if there's a late fee, if they don't pay on time, what's the net? Is it net 15, net 30, net 60? You need to understand all of these things and have them written down. Client can influence them and you might not have them influence them. This is just how you do business and they have to agree to it, right? And you have to have all the legal language. I'm not a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer. Make sure you set up your contracts appropriately that are binding and legally working in the United States, if you're in the United States, or whatever country you're in, because every country has a little bit of nuance to this. I'm not going to go into that, but consult a local expert to make sure that you have everything that you need to enforce it locally, right? And lastly, when you have that signed, make sure every party signs. I'd highly recommend investing in a software like PandaDocs or DocuSign or something. There's also free ones out there that do the same thing as DocuSign if you're just starting out. That allows you to not only send it out, but also have everyone get a copy. It's legally binding. There's no having to sign it, copy it, and scan it, and all these other things. It makes it simpler and it makes it faster so you actually get signed contracts and you're not waiting right? That's the worst, is the client's like, oh, let's move forward. And you're like, I didn't get the contract from you. Or make sure you know who's the person responsible for signing the contract so you can make sure that all the information is correct on the contract. Those are very, very important details that are often overlooked in the beginning from an organizational level, because you just want to get that project in the door, you want to get started. But before you do, you need to make sure that you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, because if something goes down in the project, which you don't think it will in the beginning, but if something happens in the project, you need to come back to that contract and enforce it. And that's really the last thing, is you do need to deliver your best solution. And part of that best solution is enforcing your contract for every client you work with. If they don't pay on time, you charge them a late fee. Because guess what? The best way for your client to pay on time in the future is they feel pain of, oh, we just got a 5% late charge on this invoice. We probably should pay that on time in the future. Also, making sure that if they don't deliver the results, like, they're set consequences, right? In the contract, it says we give you 1 week for feedback on design review. If you do not give us that feedback on time, then it could delay your project, because you might prioritize other projects that actually give their feedback on time, so that you need to actually move them up the queue so you can get work done. That pushes them back. You have to have this type of language. You have to make sure you're being consistent, and that's done and enforced the same way for every client. But you're also not, you're being supportive, but at the same time, you're being firm that you are a business. You need to make money. You need to get things done. And people can't just say, hey, I'll get it to you in 2 weeks when I have time. It's like, no, if you valued us as a business and valued us as a client, then, or as a provider, then you would basically say, hey, I respect your time. I'll get it to you in a week. Let's make this happen. If they don't do that, you have a backstop to do it. But honestly, it raises up a lot of red flags from the get-go if the client even is concerned about that, right? You need to make sure, if your client is not even going to agree to this contract and they want to compromise on things, then you probably don't want to work on that project with them. So be consistent, be clear, be firm and supportive. But at the end of the day, don't compromise. So take a breath here for a second. This is something I'm very passionate about, because I do see a lot of people who get taken advantage of in this line of work. There's a lot of businesses who have the ability to, frankly, say, this is what we do. And that's fine if you're able to make that work for you. But you need to know what's best for you and how you can do that, how you can do things, because there are really good people. There are great businesses. There are great ideas out there that you can work with that are going to respect what you can contribute. And it makes a much better quality of life and quality of projects. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And don't forget to grow as you go.